Hey, this is Tobias, the maker of ISE Steroids, and today I would like to talk about code reuse. I want to talk about PowerShell functions and PowerShell modules and what you can do to better organize your code. Because the main goal is really with PowerShell to get things done. So if you came up with some code that is really useful, you want to make sure that it is available next time you use it or you need it. Let's for a second assume that you created some piece of code. It doesn't really matter what kind of code this is, really. I'm taking some code that I know that turns text into speech. It could be something like creating a network share, whatever you want. SAPI equals new object, object, SAPI Steroids. The key is this code is too complex to be remembered. So this is really something that you may have come up with after some Googling. And it's almost done. Equals hello world. And then you came up with this code. It works right. Hello. So when I run this, it's talking to me. And by the way, if you hear an echo, that's because of the recording software. So I can run this as often as I want to. And now I want to turn this piece of code into a reusable piece that I can use later on and that I can find later on too. The first thing you've noticed is I'm using the plain ISE here, and I put all the information that I may be changing later on into parameterized variables. So I put variables on top of my script that contain all the stuff that I may want to change later. That's always a good idea. Now I would like to turn this into a piece of reusable code. And to do that, I'm launching ISE Steroids. Start Steroids. Simply because it's a module that turns your ISE editor into a more sophisticated premier PowerShell development system. So it gives me now a couple of interesting functions. If I wanted this to be reusable, all I need to do is select the code, right-click it, and say refactor turn into function. Now a wizard opens and asks me how I would like this function to be named. You can call your functions any name, but since your functions are basically later on building blocks like commandlets, you should stick to the same verb noun syntax that commandlets use too. So make sure you pick a meaningful approved verb from this list. Let's say convert to speech. And down here, that is important, the wizard automatically identifies all the variables in your script code, and it is your job to determine which of these variables should be public. So text obviously should be a public thing, so the user can change it. SAPI is an internal variable that I'm using here, so that should not be public, and all built-in variables like null wouldn't show up here anyway. So text would be something that I would like to parameterize. So I'm saying open a new script, and this is my function. So basically here's still my code, and the wizard automatically created the wrapper around it, making it a function. Here you see the comment-based help that I can fill out to provide advanced help, and these would be my parameters. I can run this now. And I now have a new command called convert to speech with one parameter text hello. If I don't submit this parameter, hello world, it'll say hello world because that's the default parameter. And if you don't like that, you can now fine-tune your code a little bit. But before we do this, I'll close this again, and I'll do one more thing, just to make it more exciting. Maybe I found out that there is a parameter, or that there is a property called rate, which determines the rate at which the text-to-speech engine would speak. Now, another thing would be I'm capitalizing these. PowerShell is case insensitive, but parameters by best practice should be capitalized. And now I do the very same thing. I'm simply selecting the whole thing, refactor, turn into function, convert to convert to speech. In this case, I have three variables here. Text and rate should be public. Sapi, again, should not be public. Here's my function. And as you see, the wizard correctly identified both parameters and put them here. Now let's fine-tune them a little bit. But before we do this, let's see how this works. I can now say convert to speech, text hello.
Hello.
But I can also say, hello, this was a radical party last night. And say rate should be something slower than normal, 10.
Hello, this was a radical party last night.
So that works too. Great. Let's fine-tune the parameters a little bit. One thing I can do is, it doesn't make sense to have a default text. So let's change this to mandatory equals true. Once it's mandatory, the user has to submit a value for this, either by providing a parameter, or if he doesn't do that, you'll get prompted. The rate could be 1, that's okay, normal speed. But let's put in a validate range. Allowed values go from -10 to 10. Again, this is stuff that you can do. You don't have to do this. It's simply plain PowerShell code that was generated by the wizard, and you can adjust it with anything that you know that PowerShell supports. So let's check this out. So if I say rate 100, I get an error message telling me it should be between -10 and 10. So that worked. And all the other stuff works now too. If I don't submit a mandatory parameter, I get asked. Hello, this is radical.
Hello, this is radical.
Hello, this is radical.
Up to now, my logic was encapsulated in a function, which is good, but it's still living in a untitled script. So once I close my ISE now, all my work would be gone. And next week or next month, when I don't think about this anymore and I would need some text-to-speech conversion, I wouldn't find it anymore, even if I saved it to a script someplace that I don't remember later on. So once you create a function, no matter how you create it, with this wizard or by hand, when you click inside a function, here is a new icon that comes that you can choose. When you click on this icon, you can export your function to your own module. Either choose an existing module or create a brand new module. The existing module list doesn't list all your modules that you have, simply only the modules that you created eventually through this wizard. Before you do this, remember that a module is a container. It's a container that organizes different scripts that all have the same topic. So when you create a new module, don't call it like your function, because later on you may want to add more functions to this module. Let's call it fun things. Eventually, you should come up with a couple of modules like network, security, file system, stuff like that, where you can organize your scripts. Up here, you have an option. If your script contains not just one function, but a whole bunch of functions, you could take them all, and you could take them or batch convert them into a module. And down here, you have a link, select location. By default, your new module would be defined or created in your user profile. If you want to create it someplace else, simply pick another location. As you can see, most of the locations are grayed out here, simply because I'm currently no administrator, so I wouldn't be able to store modules in these other locations anyway at this point. So I'm using my personal document folder, and here I could say remove the function from my script, which is useful if you want to clean up a script and externalize your functions in your script, move them out of your script into an external module. I don't do that now. I simply export this. Oh, I did I did check that. So it removed the function. Now the function is no longer inside of my ISE editor, but it is in a module now. So if I open up a different PowerShell and I say convert to from to speech, there is my command.
Hello.
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 So it's available everywhere. Just so that you don't get confused by this empty screen, let's do it again. Convert to speech, that would be my function. Oh shoot. No, I don't want to do it all over again. Let's try something else. I'm simply assuming I was visiting my computer a week from now, and I need to convert some text to speech. Because I exported it to a module, I can find it here now. There it is. I can use it. It's just like a normal commandlet.
Hello.
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 And when I load steroids, I get a couple of additional options to manage those things. So if I say convert to speech, and I want to edit my function or want to find out what the module is that it's located in, I can simply right-click it and say source code, open module folder. This would be the module folder that was created by the wizard that you've seen. Or you can say right-click, go to definition, and that is basically your script inside of your module. So when you change it here, you'll actually change your module. So basically, to create reusable code, the first step would be to encapsulate your code as a function. And the second step would be to export it to a module. As long as the module is located in any of the places listed in the environment variable PS module path, you're good, because PowerShell, beginning with version 3, finds modules located in any of these places. Now, there are a couple more options that you have when you want to create functions. Let's quickly walk you through these. If you wanted to create a function from scratch, you can simply click this icon and you get a very simple code snippet. Basically, all the code snippets, which would be another topic, code snippets are little pieces of code that you can organize by pressing Ctrl J. These are all your code snippets, and here are all my functions and function elements. Anyway, when I right-click this, I see all of my function code snippets. When I hover over it, I see a preview. So this would be a function. They're all simple functions right now. You could add your favorite templates. You could create your own templates for the functions that you often need, or you use something like from syntax. From syntax is a wizard that takes the function syntax that you would like to get. So it's the other way around. You can either click on simple syntax. This would be how you can define your function, simply by defining the parameters and assigning a value to them. Or you can use the advanced syntax, which would be defining the parameters and their values, their variable types. Let's do this. So this would be my function. I want a function get something with an optional or positional parameter name that is a string. This thing should be optional. It's an ID number, integer. This should be in string array. And this one is interesting. That's a position, which is a string, but really only 3 different legal values. And I have a switch parameter false. You can come up with anything. And once you click OK, that's the function. And it automatically turned your syntax into a valid PowerShell function. So when I run this, get something. I see all my parameters. And since I chose position as a validate set, I get even IntelliSense for the different types of allowable values that this parameter has. There's a lot more power to this. So if I revisit this from syntax, you see here check mark show options. Show options would give you the opportunity to choose the position of your inline help. You could create pipeline support, even create support for what if and confirm for risk mitigation parameters, and also create dynamic parameters. With this list, you define the risk level of your script. So if your script is really risky, deleting things that can't be undone, choose a high risk level, and PowerShell will automatically make sure that there are confirmation dialogues. What you do in here, basically, creates always just sample code that you can then adjust. Let's simply create a function that does not very much. It's some number. It is supposed to pick a number, which should be an integer. But this time, I want pipeline support and I want also dynamic parameters. So here is my function. Value from pipeline is all in my parameter. I simply have to say I want this parameter to receive value from the pipeline. And I have a dynamic parameter that we'll take a look at in a second. Here's my begin block, my process block, my end block. That's important for pipeline support. Begin block would initialize the code before the pipeline runs. Process is your loop that it gets executed for every element. Here, for example, this was the parameter number. Here I could place some code saying I am processing number. And the end block would be for cleanup things. So I'm running this now. Note when I click the play button, as with all functions, nothing really happens. Just the function gets defined. The function really is only a script block attached with a name. This function we don't need any longer. Let's delete it. So now when I say get some number 12, I'm processing number 12. Now I'm piping in a whole bunch of numbers. Get some number. As you can see, my function is pipeline enabled. The wizard added all the necessary things like the process block and this description, value from pipeline, so that PowerShell knows which parameter should receive the pipeline input. In addition, this function gets some number also received a dynamic parameter. That is really complex stuff. That's so complex that you normally wouldn't even touch it. But once you have a template like this, you can easily do this. Take a look at what it does. A dynamic parameter is a parameter that is not always there. It depends on where you are, what your conditions are, what you defined. For example, getChildItem has a parameter called file, but it's not always there. If your current location, for example, is not a file drive, but for example, the registry, getChildItem would not show this anymore. That's a dynamic parameter. In this case, the sample code created by the wizard would create a dynamic parameter based on your time. If it's before 12 o'clock, you get the parameter skip morning coffee. Let's assume, or let's check out what happens if I change this to 10 o'clock, because it's 10:36. I want to see what happens after 10 o'clock. Get some number. In this case, I get quality of lunch. So here I have another dynamic parameter, but this one would only be displayed after now 10 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock when you take the original sample code. So the wizard and ISE Steroids really give you lots of sample code based on what you really need to do, and you can use it as it is, or you can adjust it, because anything that you create with ISE Steroids is simple PowerShell code. It does not require ISE Steroids to run. ISE Steroids is your sophisticated development environment helping you to create the code. It's not needed to run the code. The functionality of your wizard is also available in a more accessible way. So if you want to really quickly create a function from scratch, get BIOS, and you know that you need maybe a computer name, string, which should be optional, and maybe also a credential, also optional, and that's the type system management automation PS credential, the weird type. Then you can simply take this whole thing. Basically, it's no valid PowerShell code. You can see this with the syntax errors. It's simply text that I would like to convert into valid PowerShell code. So I want to convert this syntax into a valid function definition. There you go. What it does is it takes the correct values for the types that you chose. It also discovers that this is a PS credential, so it also adds this attribute that enables you to both submit a real credential or a username that then would be turned into a credential. Okay, there's two more things. If you want to explore how a real commandlet defines its parameters to get inspiration, simply take a commandlet that you'd like to examine, get child item, do a right click and say source code convert to function. When I do this, I get the exact same thing. This is not the function get child item. You don't see the source code. It's simply the wrapper. It defines a function that would exactly work like the commandlet get child item does it. So if a commandlet does something that you would like to mimic in your function, simply do this, turn the commandlet into a function wrapper and check out how the commandlet realized that. And then there's one more thing. Let's assume you're diving deeper in system programming and you notice that there are types like, for example, system environment. Let's type system environment. And they all have properties and methods. System environment is an especially interesting class or type because it has things like set environment variable, which allows you to set environment variables permanently, not just for the PowerShell session. So when I use this set environment variable, I would have to figure out what these parameters mean, and then typically I would turn it into a civilized PowerShell function. In this case, all I do is right-click the static method, and then I say refactor, turn method into function. This gives me two overloads. It gives me two functions. This would be one, this would be another one, because the method that I chose has two different overloads, two different parameter sets if you want. So it's your choice now which one you want to keep. The first overload would take a variable name and a value. The second one takes a variable name, a value, and a target. Let's simply keep overload 2. So when I run this now, with just one click, I civilized a API or .NET function, and I can now say set environment variable ABC, value 123, target, machine, process, user. Let's say user. And this would create an environment variable for my user ABC123. Let's check it out. Oh, where's my PC? Properties. ABC123. So to sum it up, PowerShell ISE Steroids is a module for your ISE editor, and it helps you create two things that are really important. It assists you in creating functions in various ways. You can simply select code and turn it into a function. You can create a function body from your syntax. You can spy on the function definitions and commandlets, or you can even auto-generate PowerShell functions from .NET method calls, static method calls. Then, once you have a function, no matter how you created it, even this set environment variable function, simply click on it and click this button to turn it into a module or export it to a module. Once you do this, you finally get the reusable code, because once you export your function to a module, it is available anywhere in your ecosystem. So if I take this function set environment variable and put it also into fun stuff, fun things, my module now contains two functions. My module location is my documents folder, Windows PowerShell, modules, fun things. And this is the folder that I can share with my colleagues. I simply take this folder, drop it into another documents Windows PowerShell modules folder, and then that's it. I have two more functions. I have convert to speech and set environment variables. And basically that's what you should do in PowerShell. Don't do the same thing over and over again. Simply, if there is a commandlet missing, come up with your own function that fills in the gap, test it, make sure it runs, and then export it to a module. Okay, now if you would like to learn more about ISE Steroids, either visit our YouTube channel, ISE Steroids, or come and visit our webpage, www.powertheshell.com. And may the PowerShell always be with you. Bye-bye.